believe that there is something else. And if you don't, then there is not going to be anything else for you. In that respect, other cultures, we may call them benighted, we may call them primitive, we may call them superstitious, we may call them anything, had an advantage over us. Because the simplest peasant in the Middle Ages, I would say, not only believed it, but to a certain extent knew that there are worlds upon worlds upon worlds beyond this one. And that they are interesting, that they are powerful, that they are exciting, that they are. But we have gotten away from that. With our extremely this-worldly secular orientation, we have gotten away from that, unfortunately. But the magical tradition and the entire, all magical practice is really based on the idea that there is something else. And now that's where the religious angle comes in. The magical tradition, on the other hand, is, how should I put it, is not only contrary to the secular and largely materialistic point of view, but it is also contrary to a certain extent, is also in opposition to much of the contemporary conventional religious point of view. Why is that? Because most of the people who are religious nowadays have a worldview that is terribly oversimplified. It consists of them and God. And of course they come first and God comes later. And that's all there is. Just listen to those incredibly benighted, boring prayers that people do when they say grace at the table, especially on Thanksgiving Day. Because then you have a bigger meal and people feel you have to have a bigger prayer. And it just goes on and on and on, droning about everything and asking about blessings for Aunt Fanny's bunions and for the little children's rabbit and on and on and on and on and on. And you wonder why God himself gets bored with humanity and their requests. But the issue is that the more ancient, the less rationalized and pared down religious point of view always recognized that there is a vast intermediate region of consciousness, not geographical region, between the human and the divine. And this is the region that is populated by angels and populated by spirits, and the lesser regions perhaps even by demons and the spirits of the dead and all that sort of thing. And again, this comes clear from the old shamans who would have their totem pole, the axis mundi on which they climb up, and the lower parts have to do with the spirits of the dead and with sort of demonic beings, and then the upper part has to do with the gods and the goddesses and so forth. And it is this region that the magician addresses. And this is a religious task, because the magician will tell you that without a creative acquaintance with these intermediate regions, without an understanding of what goes on there, without a knowledge of the geography, without an acquaintance with the flora and the fauna, you will never get through to the source. So if your objective ultimately is the divine, then also you need a practical acquaintance with what exists between yourself and the divine. This is an understanding that is universal. In more recent years, the most magical form of Buddhism, for instance, the Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, and that the Dalai Lama belongs to, has become reasonably popular in the West. And that's what you find there. That is why people are taught the bardo. That's why they're even being read the bardo when the person is dying, so that he may know what happens afterwards, what kind of regions he has to travel through or she has to travel through, and then how he might get to the ultimate reality, to the Buddha light through that. Because when that doesn't happen, then these regions will catch the individual and bring him back into embodiment. This is one particular way of viewing these situations. So the magical effort then has always been directed toward this extending of ourselves into realities greater and deeper, and certainly in many ways perhaps even more complex than the one that we are aware of here, for the purpose of extending and enlarging our consciousness, and if you want to take a religious view of it, of eventually really facilitating our breaking through to the ultimate reality. To put it very briefly, let's say there is a physical reality, a personal psychic reality, and then beyond that there is a vast, vast intermediate reality. And then there is the ultimate reality. This is not a theory. This is not something that I have dreamt up or that I found in one or two books. But this is a universally present psycho-cosmological model. There is no place on the face of this earth where you can go. From the Siberian shamans to the Polynesians to the Africans, some parts of Africa is a vast continent. Just like it's like saying America. Well, New York is very different. What you find in New York will be very different from what you find in the Amazon jungle. Similarly, but there are incredibly complex magical cosmological systems in certain African traditions, and they have been to greater or lesser extent investigated too. And so everywhere you find this basic magical understanding. All right, now that should be enough about that. Now the question is, which is a very Western question, okay, but how? This is the model. This is what ought to be done. How is it to be done? Well, the how is again pretty universal, and we've been dealing with it all along in the various modalities that I have been reviewing, but it always amounts to the same thing. Somewhere along the line there has to occur a pretty powerful change, altering of consciousness. It's not going to happen while we are in our ordinary everyday consciousness. Why do you suppose people have been interested in interpreting dreams for such a doggone long time? I mean, we have dream interpretation books coming from the early dynasties of Egypt. And man, oh man, that was a long time ago. And other ancient cultures. Because the dream is an altered state of consciousness. And the memories that we bring back from that particular altered state are the memories literally of a different reality. That is why people were interested in it. But that, of course, is only one avenue, one door. And the memory, the remembering of dreams is quite a task in itself, and so forth. And so there have always been various avenues of the altering of consciousness. And one of the important issues has always been, and still is, as I just indicated with the dream, is that you need to remember. And remembering is an aspect of integrating what you have experienced. when we have altered states of consciousness, we would like to bring back into our unaltered states, since we eventually always seem to come back to them. It's a kind of a minor reincarnation. You are in another, perhaps a more exciting world, and then it kind of wears off, and then you're back in this one again, and you say, oh no, not this again. But that's, so it goes.